Yeah, I'm working for the Danish transmission system operator. My main job is working in NSOE, so the European Association for Transmission System Operators, and I'm working a lot for the 10-year network development plan, which you heard about this morning. And of course, okay, I see, could you do anything that I see the slides here as well? Yeah, and I will introduce how we got to recently 42% of wind penetration of consumption. Just a second. Number 3. Yeah. Thank you. So who or what is Denmark? So this is a kind of both maps on top of each other. You can see India in red, and which is then put over Europe, and then the very tiny spot on this map in the middle is Denmark. And that's where it all began. So it kind of 1957, there was the first wind turbine set up, and nobody at that time knew that we would get that far. So in Denmark, reaching this high level, also taking it further to other European countries, and now in the discussion of climate change, the whole world is thinking about wind energy is one of the components of saving the climate. So actually, we are quite proud that this small turbine in Denmark started it all, you can say. So here are some figures, some central figures. Maybe focus on the bottom part in green. There you can see the share of renewables last 2 years. Yesterday, Johannes, are you here? Yeah. So you said you have kind of 48% in your system, renewables share of consumption. So we have 55. You try to catch us if you can. But we are close, I must admit. Yeah. So Denmark is, in general, so it's a very small country. You can see it's kind of 350 times 350 kilometers, and we have 5 million inhabitants, really small, but small is beautiful actually because you can try a lot of ideas. It's you're very agile and don't have big discussion because we are so few people, and also Danish mentality is just try and look what happens, and this helps when you want to introduce something new. So Denmark is located between a hydro system in the north, which is Norway and Sweden, and mainly thermal dominated system in the south. So we have also very big geographic advantages, and this is very obvious that implementing wind into the Danish system is easy, actually more easy than in Germany, I must admit. Due to hydro having high seasonal patterns and thermal systems having daily patterns, it's very easy then to balance the wind in the system by exploiting these differences. So we, since the 70s, we built the first DC connections to the Nordic systems in order to be able to balance the systems. So if we have, in cases when we have too much wind in Denmark, we simply export it to Norway. They are nearly completely hydro, Norway and Sweden, hydro systems, and they can easily store it. We use it as a battery, and if we don't have enough wind, then they sell it back to us. So that's very easy. Another thing is that we have, although we are so tiny, we have 2 different synchronous areas. So the eastern part belongs to the Nordic system in yellow, and the western part belongs to the former UCTE system in green. And so since 2000, I think it was 11, we connected both systems due to political reasons. So technically it was not really necessary because you have 2 similar systems concerning the production. Usually transmission is initiated if you have different production fleets, and then you can exploit the differences and to level the prices in the systems. Yeah. So some more figures. In the 80s, we were the system at the top, so very few central units, and now we are a system with a lot of dispersed generation, both CHP and wind turbines, spread like measles all over the country. And you can see, if you look at consumption in east and west, you can see that we can't cover the consumption with central plants any longer. And we have, especially in the western system, we have more installed wind capacity than the peak load. So we are very safe, you can say, but even more safe due to the strong interconnections. So we can, looking at the whole of Denmark, we can export 60% of the installed generation, or the other way around, we can import, we have import capacity for all our interconnectors of 95% of the peak load. So that's a very comfortable situation, more comfortable than 50 Hertz has. But even though we want to build even more interconnectors, because it also helps to adjust the prices. The target for Denmark is that we want to be, we want to have 50% of electricity consumption covered by wind by 2020, and by 2050 we want to be completely independent of fossil fuels. Yeah, that's quite a task, and we have a history of long history of close collaboration between the heat system and the electricity system. So since the 80s, this is very closely connected, and the other sectors are connected as well. So we are transmission system operator both for electricity and for gas. So for us, it's also easier than for others to exploit the benefits of merging the benefits. Yeah, our company's commitments are, as all the TSOs have, security of supply. We want to support the green transition, and we want to offer a healthy investment climate for the market participants. So it's also, in contrast to other TSOs, it's our responsibility to design the market, so to take care that there are enough incentives for producers to build plants. If we can see, well, power plants are missing or whatever is missing, we have to design then the system. Here the developments, you can see fuel for electricity generation. The blue is coal. Since the 90s up to now, it decreased by 70%. The gas is also decreasing as well. So also the sources in the North Sea, we are shortly running out from gas, so we have to use. And here you can see demand and generation. The demand is the black curve, and generation you can see since the 19th the growth in blue of wind power, and since 2012 also solar power. We don't have that much sun in Denmark, but anyway we have kind of 600 megawatt or 700 megawatt solar power installed in the system today. So what is the recipe? Again, also we discovered a well-transmission grid and interconnectors is key to be able to integrate renewables, on especially wind. Then you have seen it already on the map. Then favorable conditions and good international electricity markets is decisive. A flexible system, both generation, demand, whatever you can think of flexibility, and forecasting and planning operation tools. So I will go through the last three topics a bit now. So here you can see the situation which we have very often. So this is a typical week in Denmark. In light blue you can see the demand, and in dark blue you can see the wind power, ranging from nearly nothing to ranges where we exceed the consumption. And so we have always, within a week, we have very often situations where we have to balance a lot. So how do we do this? Here you can see the same week with a bit more information. You can also see imports in green, production of large plants in light blue, and local plants in gray. And this is actually a historic week, because on Tuesday, between Tuesday and Wednesday, This was a special situation, so my colleagues came to the control room and they realized, wow, there's not a single central power plant dispatched. So this was the first day, 2nd September of 2015, that there was no conventional unit online. So this was special, and she thought, well, this is new, but the system survived, nothing happens, and since then we have the situation once in a while. We can also see a situation here. We have where the wind exceeded the demand, so then of course we export. Looking into a bit more into the details of that week, we can see that the upper curve is the price, the spot price, and we can see that it's very logic in terms of when there's high wind, then the spot price goes down, and the system behaves like expected. And here we can see the situation where we had exports as well. Here we can see, wow, there's negative prices. We introduced actually negative prices in 2011. But even though we have negative prices, we are exporting. How can this be? So the reason was that we had higher prices in Norway, Sweden, and I think in Germany, not in Germany, in Norway and Sweden, but we had similar prices, negative prices in Germany and Denmark. And so then we were transit country. So Germany exported to Norway and via our system, and that's why we had export. And looking into this point in time where we did not have large power plants, we can see the situation here. So if you connect markets and build interconnections, the target is to level the prices in both ends. And you can see here at that day, in this hour where we had no central plants online, Denmark West and Norway shared the same price, and Denmark East and Sweden shared the same price. So, there's a higher price in Germany, so the logic would be that we should export, because in a market the electricity should always flow to the high price areas, and this is kind of counterintuitive. So why that? So everything was due to the market, and this was a kind of special regulation for Germany, because actually right now the German system operator is expanding the grid. So there are congestions, they're expanding the grid, and in order to relieve their system, they bought the opportunity to get rid of their wind into our system, so that we relieve their system and get their wind and get some money as well. And at the same time, you would also expect that we would have exported to Johannes area 50 hertz, but this is actually 0. And the reason behind this is that we have HVDCs between these countries. No, actually not here. But sometimes we use the system also to create artificial loop flows. And there were congestions in the Polish system. Poland is behind the legend, you can say, and there were congestions in the Polish system. And by creating these loop flows, we help the Polish transmission system operator. Everything based on market mechanisms. So we believe in the market in Denmark. You can see also wind power believes in the market. Here is in red, you can see prices in euro, and you can see that the wind power plants, they follow very nicely the market. Also conventional power plants, we have very, very good coal and whatever fuel power plants in Denmark. They are have a very broad operational range. So usually you have your power plant ranges between 100 and down to 35% of nominal power, but Danish plants, they can go down to 10%. It's done by bypassing the steam, bypassing some turbines and some special control to facilitate this, and so then they can go even further down, and which also prevents them from stopping and prevents them from extra costs. And this was even Danish power plants, they run when the Germans have to turn their power plants off, which sometimes gives, of course, a strange picture. We have a lot of wind, but anyway, the CO2 emissions don't go down. That's because we serve the German market with the rest of the Danish coal power plants. Also, the Danish conventional plants are very quick in regulating rate, so they can regulate 3 to 4% of their nominal power per minute. I think what the market is, you know this. So we have we started in the 19th with Nordic market. We have day-ahead market. We have an intraday market, and we have the regulating power market between the TSOs, where we actually have 1 hour to prepare physical balancing. So 1 hour is not that much. And so then forecast comes into the picture. We need good forecasts in order to stabilize the system and in order to do it at least cost. Here you can see we use a numerical weather prediction system from 2 days ahead down to, if you go from the right-hand side to the left, from 2 days ahead down to hours ahead, and we are at the root mean error about 3.8%, which is quite good, but we can even be better. So one meter per second wind deviation or mistake in the forecast would mean 500 megawatt. And 500 megawatt in the Danish system is a lot because we are so small. So we have it's good if we have good forecasts. So what we do then is that we use measurements, online measurements from the wind farms out in the field. So from 10 hours ahead down to the actual operating hour, we use these measurements, and then we can get the forecast error down to 1.5% for the hour ahead. And this is much better than these 3.8. So this means if you take this 1.5% error multiplied by the installed wind generation, you get kind of a 75 megawatt, and that's a bit more than 10% of the dimensioning fault for Denmark. So that's a good value to work with. Actually, it's the order of size of mistakes in demand forecast. So actually this is very good. So summarizing, that operational planning based on best predictions is very valuable. And it's a colleague of mine always says it's more efficient and safe to be prepared than surprised. So having good forecasts really pays off. Then you can minimize the need for automatic reserve, which is more expensive than the manual reserve which we have at hand in our system between the TSOs. And you can minimize the need for ancillary service, which also costs quite a lot. So this system gets cheaper. Then you can use slow manual reserves, which are cheaper. And by continuously updating the knowledge and the data, we can also press the system closer to the limits. Everything in our mind is that we have to serve security of supply, and it works. So we did not have a major fault since, I think, 2003, if I remember correctly, due to some problems in the Swedish system. So preparing for the future, we made a study looking at residual load. So what's that? Residual demand is the demand you have minus wind, minus photovoltaic, and then you get the residual demand. And this should be investigated. And so at the left-hand side here, we have a typical week of residual demand up to 7 gigawatts, and nearly no sun, nearly no wind. And so we found this is over a year. Surprisingly, we have sun in summer and we have wind in non-summer times. And this is a picture of the load, but residual load is actually quite even. So either we have sun or we have wind, and we can serve the residual demand. And then the composition of this residual demand is indicated in these pictures. This is for 1 hour, this for 6 hours, 1 day, and so on. So the longer the time period you look at, the less is the share of the classic non-flexible demand. In other way of showing this is that we try to bring down the residual demand by subtracting the flexible part out of it. And we noticed that for the first 5 hours, there is flexibility in the system, like electric vehicles, either loading or charging or decharging. But for periods above 10 hours, it gets difficult, but that's not a problem because then we can use the market and interconnectors or whatever. We did this exercise by taking time series for 10 years for Denmark only, and on the right-hand side for Denmark and its neighbors, and its message remains the same. There's not enough power plant capacity in neighboring countries to cover the demand everywhere, but flexible demand and vehicle-to-grid might help. I talked about that we will combine the systems, so the sectors. Actually, you don't want to have wind or solar. You want to have a service. So you want to have heat or cool. You need process heating, lighting, whatever, transport, and you can cover your demand. The mouse doesn't work, by different resources indicated at the left-hand side. And then there are transport systems, there are physical procedures where you can combine different fuels and transform one into the other. And if you think of service, it's always good for your service if you are connected to more than one resource by whatever physical process in the middle. CHP is the easiest example. You have electricity and heat, and you can feed this by different means. And then you can also enjoy the lowest prices if you have access to several resources. And we try to assess what this means for our system. Yeah. If you should have questions, also we have some consultancy activities. Now it's advertisement, so if you should have questions, then you are welcome to contact me, and I will make a note to my colleague running this consultancy activities. Thank you.